The wind that sweeps across Europe tonight carries an echo whisper of something ancient, metallic, and unholy. It sounds like the grinding of iron beneath the earth, the slow awakening of a machine that once slept beneath the ruins of empire. And at its heart, the name is the same one it has always been: Germany. The country once torn apart by war and guilt, now again stands at the center of the continent, tightening its grip not with tanks or soldiers, but with energy, economics, and the subtle art of dependence. But this time, the enemy isn't across its borders. It's the very system Europe was built to protect. For decades, Germany was Europe's model of order and restraint, the nation that promised to never again lead Europe into ruin. Yet, beneath its polished surface, the cracks are widening. The powerhouse of the European Union has become a prisoner of its own creation, an industrial machine built on cheap energy, open trade, and fragile unity. When the world began to shift, when Russia's pipelines closed and China's appetite waned, the German miracle began to tremble. And now, in quiet desperation, Germany is making choices that could shatter the foundation of Europe itself. Choices whispered in Brussels hallways, printed between the lines of economic forecasts, and spoken in the coded language of diplomacy. You see, Germany's problem is not only economic, it's existential. After the Second World War, the nation was reborn under an unspoken deal: prosperity in exchange for humility. It would never again lead by power, only by example. But as decades passed, its economy grew fat on globalization, its industries dependent on exports that kept the whole continent fed. The euro was its shield, the European Union its empire in disguise. And when the energy that fueled it, the cheap gas from the east, was cut off, the German machine began to choke. What followed was not a public confession of weakness, but a quiet, desperate maneuvering. A reordering of Europe's energy markets, a reshaping of alliances, and an invisible shift of power that few noticed until it was already underway. Behind every policy speech and press release, there's a shadow. A ghost of an older Germany, one that fears collapse more than conflict. To save itself, Berlin has begun to act in ways that unnerve its neighbors. The push for green energy, while noble in appearance, conceals a dangerous imbalance: the deliberate dismantling of the European energy system that once bound the continent together. Nations like Poland, Hungary, and Italy now whisper of manipulation, of being cornered by the very partner that promised unity. And across the Atlantic, in Washington and London, analysts watch with unease as Germany begins to prioritize survival over solidarity. It's a story that feels eerily familiar, because history, like an old ghost, never truly dies, it waits. The last time Germany stood at the crossroads of economic desperation and political ambition, the world was pulled into chaos. Of course, today's Germany is not the Germany of the 1930s, yet the forces driving it, fear of decline, hunger for stability, the illusion of control, are hauntingly similar. Factories that once symbolized power now sit silent, energy prices soar. Protests rumble beneath the calm surface of democracy. And somewhere within the marble halls of Berlin, the decision-makers understand that to save Germany, Europe itself might have to suffer. But no one will say it aloud. Not yet. Instead, the language of crisis management becomes the language of control. Every bailout, every energy treaty, every whispered meeting among finance ministers is another stitch in a dark web of necessity. Germany's leaders insist that their policies are for the good of Europe, but history has taught us that empires rarely confess their intentions until it is far too late. In the corridors of power, the tension is palpable. France looks eastward with suspicion, southern nations mutter of austerity and betrayal, and the smaller states, the Balkans, wonder how long they can afford loyalty to a dream that no longer feeds them. And through it all, Germany stands silent, its economic shadow stretching across the continent like a storm cloud. The European Union was meant to bind nations in peace, but what happens when its strongest pillar begins to crumble from within? Some say this is simply economics, a cycle, a correction. But others whisper of something deeper, something buried in the psyche of the German state, the need for order, efficiency, and dominance through systems rather than force. In the age of industry, that meant factories and machines. In the age of finance, it means policies and currencies. Germany doesn't need to conquer Europe, it merely needs to regulate it. And so, the lines of control are drawn not with barbed wire, but with bureaucracy, a subtler, colder kind of power. If you're still watching, perhaps you've begun to feel it, to that strange pull toward the forbiddance, the sense that you're hearing something not meant to be spoken aloud. These are the truths buried beneath the headlines, beneath the smiling photographs of European unity. And if you crave more of these hidden stories, if you want to see the world not as they tell it, but as it truly is, then step deeper into the dark with us. Subscribe, not for entertainment, but for revelation. Every week, we unearth another secret they'd rather you forget. The past doesn't stay buried, it festers, and we are here to exhume it. Now, as Germany's leaders look toward the future, they face an impossible choice. Rebuild their economy by sacrificing their European partners, or let the great machine fall apart piece by piece. The first path means control, the second, collapse. And so, Berlin moves cautiously, cloaking national interest in the language of unity. Investment packages disguised as solidarity funds, energy regulations that just happen to favor German industries. Economic reforms that tighten the Eurozone's grip on smaller nations. Each act defended as necessity, each consequence dismissed as coincidence. Yet, for those who look closely, the pattern is unmistakable. There are whispers, too, of something else, of deals struck beyond Europe's borders. German corporations seeking lifelines in Asia, quietly rebuilding the trade arteries that once made them invincible. The same global dependency that once fed the empire may soon return, wearing a different mask. But this time, it could tear Europe apart from within. Because when one nation grows stronger while its partners grow weaker, resentment breeds. And resentment is the seed of rebellion. Economists talk in numbers, politicians in promises. But the truth beneath both is the same. Germany is running out of time. The nation's aging population, its over-reliance on exports, its crumbling infrastructure all point toward a reckoning. And yet, its leaders cling to the illusion that Europe will continue to carry its weight, that the euro will always bend before it breaks. But history shows that when an empire tries to preserve itself through control, it often ends in collapse. Across the continent, you can already feel the tremors, rising populism, fractured alliances, murmurs of countries reconsidering their place in the European dream. And while the surface remains calm, beneath it, something old is stirring. The ghosts of past crises, past wars, past ambitions, they're not memories, they're warnings. Because the last time Europe ignored the signs, it found itself in ashes. Imagine it, a continent where unity was supposed to mean safety, now teetering on the edge of economic war. Each country clutching its own survival while pretending to hold hands. Germany, the reluctant leader, now a reluctant villain. Its choices ripple outward like waves from a sinking ship. And somewhere in that dark water, the question lingers: how many nations will it pull down to stay afloat? Perhaps that is the truest danger of all. Not that Germany seeks domination, but that it cannot imagine a world in which it is not the center. Its every act, every reform, every crisis response guided by a single, haunting principle: Germany must endure, no matter the cost. The rest of Europe can adjust or perish trying. And as the lights flicker across the continent, as economies strain and alliances fray, we are left with a chilling realization: Europe's greatest threat may not come from beyond its borders, but from the desperate heartbeat within them. The machine is still turning, slower now, heavier, but it's turning nonetheless. And if history has taught us anything, it's that machines built on fear have a way of devouring the hands that created them. So listen closely as the echoes of the past blend with the hum of the present. The gears are grinding again, deep beneath the soil of Europe. The question is no longer whether Germany will save its economy, but what and who it will sacrifice to do so. And now, I leave you with this: if Europe's future truly lies in Germany's hands, whose hands will hold the ashes when it all burns again. Tell me what you see in the smoke.